Okay, so I will now address cross-cultural variations in the association between the big five, social-emotional skills, and cognitive skills. There are numerous studies investigating the link between cognitive ability and personality. This has been studied over and over the last decades. There are studies, there are meta-analysis, there are mega meta-analysis summarizing the meta-analysis. So there is a huge body of findings showing that personality and cognitive ability are related, but only minorly related. They share 5 to 10% of variance. And of the big five dimensions, the strongest association is found for openness, followed by emotional stability, or neuroticism as the other side. And some studies showed that conscientiousness is negatively related to cognitive ability. This, however, is not reflected in most meta-analysis. So why should we address this question again? Well, we have the data, but what is the point of investigating it again? Most of the primary studies conducted thus far are based on highly selective samples. Of course, student samples, job applicants, or military members. So highly homogeneous samples. And this is, of course, then reflected in the meta-analysis conducted. These homogeneous studies do not allow to investigate socio-demographic variances within these samples, as they are so homogeneous with regard to gender, for example, if we talk about military members, or age, when we talk about students, etc. And nearly all of these studies were conducted in one country only. There is data from different countries, of course. There's a lot of North American data, there's a lot of German data on that, but no one compared the data across countries. Even the mega meta-analysis did not. So our aim was to investigate the relation between the big five and cognitive ability based on data representing the general adult population. And we wanted to investigate whether we can replicate the findings found in these selected samples also for the general population. We also wanted to investigate to what degree these results remain if we control for socio-demographic variances like gender, like education, like migration status, like labor force participation. And we wanted to compare, as also my title says, this across countries. So we wanted to see whether these effects are generalizable across the different countries, or if they differ across countries. Not surprisingly, we used data of PIAAC, of the current PIAAC 2023 wave, and this is really a wonderful data set for investigating this. We used the measures of the 26 countries assessing the BFI2XS. Don't be surprised that we used 26 countries and not, as Matthias in his study used, 27 countries. We excluded the Danish data as they did not have the socio-demographic variables included in their public use file. We used all three cognitive domains assessed in PIAAC: literacy, numeracy, and adaptive problem solving, based on the 10 plausible values. As these domains are highly correlated by over 0.90, we aggregated the finding to one cognitive ability measure. We just replicated, as reviewers requested this, we just replicated these findings for all three domains separately, and I can tell you it's absolutely the same for the single domains. So let us look what we investigated. We, first of all, investigated to what degree the associations between personality and cognitive ability are replicable in this data set across all countries and for the different countries. What we found, first of all, is that the shared variance across all big 5 domains and cognitive ability was 4%, so more at the lower bound of what has previously found, but we found a rather similar amount of variance explained. More interestingly was when we look at the different countries. We see that in some countries, like Germany, Austria, or Italy, about 10% of the variance in cognitive ability were explained by personality. In other countries, like Sweden, it was only 1%. It was more or less independent personality and cognitive ability in Sweden. When we look at the different big 5 domains, we could clearly replicate the typically found picture, namely that openness was strongest related to cognitive ability, followed by emotional stability. We found a negative effect for conscientiousness and smaller effects for agreeableness and extraversion. Also here we found differences across countries. The dots you see here are the 26 different countries. And you see that, for example, for conscientiousness, there are some variations with 0 associations in some countries and rather strong associations in others. But you can also see that the strongest effect is found for conscientiousness. In some countries, we find this negative association, and in others, we find rather strong positive associations between conscientiousness and cognitive ability. In the next step, we wanted to investigate to what degree these effects remain when we control for sociodemographic variations. We then ran 2 sets of regression analysis. In the first one, we only included the sociodemographics, as mentioned, gender, age, education, migration, labor force participation. And in the second step, we included the big 5. And we saw that about 1/4 of the variance is explained by the sociodemographic variables, and we have a surplus of 3% then by the big 5. So it's a bit lower than when we include the big 5 only, but it is still a similar proportion of the variance as an add-on. When we look at the different countries, we see that also this surplus varies across countries. There are some countries, like, for example, France, where we do not find any surplus. Other countries, we find some surpluses. And they also, of course, vary in their size. Also, the relationship between the different big 5 domains and cognitive ability is slightly reduced when we control for sociodemographic variables, not surprisingly, but the overall picture, the pattern is still the same, so openness followed by emotional stability show the strongest associations with cognitive ability. So to sum up, pooled across countries, the magnitude of the variance explained by the big 5 was with 4% at the lower bound of what has been typically found thus far. More importantly, the share of the variance in cognitive ability jointly explained by the big 5 varied substantially across the different countries between 1 and 10%. Openness and emotional stability were the big 5 domains most strongly associated with cognitive ability. The relationship between conscientiousness and cognitive ability varies strongly among countries, with positive effects in some countries, negative in others. When we control for sociodemographic factors, the relation between personality and cognitive ability was reduced, However, even though reduced in size, the different personality domains remained stable in the way they were associated with cognitive ability. Thank you for your attention, and if you want to have a look at the preprint of the paper, this is here under the barcode. Thank you.